Picture this. It's the dead of winter in northern Japan. Snow blankets the landscape, and temperatures plummet well below freezing. Yet inside traditional Japanese homes, there are no roaring fireplaces, no massive stone hearths like you'd find in European castles or American colonial houses. How did people survive? The answer reveals a fascinating approach to winter living that challenges everything we think we know about staying warm. When Western visitors first arrived in Japan during the 16th century, they were absolutely baffled. Japanese houses seemed designed to do the opposite of what made sense for cold climates. Walls were made of paper screens. Floors were raised off the ground. Rooms flowed into one another with minimal separation. Where Europeans built thick stone walls and small windows to trap heat, the Japanese created homes that seemed to invite the cold inside. But here's the thing. This wasn't ignorance or poor planning. Traditional Japanese architecture represented a completely different philosophy about how to live with winter rather than fight against it. To understand this, we need to explore the ingenious heating methods, cultural practices, and architectural innovations that kept people warm for over 1,000 years. At the heart of many traditional Japanese homes was the irori, a sunken hearth built directly into the floor. Unlike a fireplace built into a wall, the irori was a square pit, typically about 3 feet across, cut into the wooden floor and lined with clay or stone. A pothook called a jizai kagi hung from the ceiling above it, allowing families to suspend cooking pots over the glowing charcoal. The irori wasn't just for cooking. It was the social and thermal center of the home. Family members would gather around it, sitting on the floor with their legs dangling into the recessed area, feeling the radiant heat on their shins and feet. The charcoal burned slowly and steadily, producing consistent warmth without the intense heat of a roaring wood fire. What made the irori particularly clever was its efficiency. Unlike a fireplace that sends most of its heat up the chimney, the irori radiated heat in all directions. The warm air rose naturally, heating the ceiling and the second floor if there was one. The surrounding floor became warm to the touch, and because the fire was in the center of the living space rather than against a wall, everyone could benefit from its warmth equally. But the irori had another secret weapon: smoke. Yes, smoke. In traditional Japanese homes, there often wasn't a proper chimney. Instead, smoke from the irori drifted upward, filling the ceiling space before gradually escaping through gaps in the roof and walls. This might sound terrible, but it served multiple purposes. The smoke preserved the wooden beams and thatching of the roof, protecting them from insects and rot. It also created a layer of warm air in the upper part of the house, providing insulation. And over decades, the smoke created a beautiful dark patina on the wood and ceiling materials. Now, sitting around an irori was wonderful. But what about sleeping? This is where one of Japan's most ingenious inventions comes in: the kotatsu. The original kotatsu, developed during the Muromachi period in the 14th century, was brilliantly simple. You'd take a small charcoal brazier and place it in a pit in the floor, similar to an irori but smaller. Over this, you'd place a wooden frame, and over that frame, you'd drape a thick quilted blanket called a futon. The whole thing created a heated table. People would sit around it with their legs underneath the blanket, trapping the warmth from the charcoal below. Later versions, called okigotatsu, were portable. Instead of a pit in the floor, the heat source sat on the ground, covered by a low table, with the blanket sandwiched between the table frame and the tabletop. This meant you could move your warm spot wherever you wanted. Families would gather around the kotatsu for meals, for working, for socializing. Your upper body might be cold, but your legs and lower torso stayed toasty warm. The kotatsu represents a fundamental difference in Japanese heating philosophy. Instead of trying to heat an entire room or house to a comfortable temperature, the Japanese focused on heating people directly. This approach, called personal heating or spot heating, was far more energy efficient, especially in homes with minimal insulation. Of course, nighttime presented its own challenges. Sleeping in an unheated room when it's freezing outside requires serious preparation. This is where the Japanese futon system showed its brilliance. Unlike Western beds, which elevate you off the floor on a frame, Japanese futons were thick quilted mattresses placed directly on the tatami mat floor. For winter, people used multiple layers. At the bottom was the shikibuton, the sleeping mattress. On top of you went the kakabuton, a thick quilted comforter. In the coldest weather, you might use multiple kakabuton, creating a warm cocoon. But there was more. Many people used a yutanpo, a hot water bottle made of ceramic, metal, or later rubber. Before bed, you'd fill it with hot water from the irori or stove and place it inside your futon to pre-warm the bedding. Some people wrapped it in cloth and kept it by their feet all night. The yutanpo could stay warm for hours, providing comfort through the coldest part of the night. Wealthier households might use a method called andon, which was essentially a paper lantern with a candle inside. While primarily used for light, several andon placed around a room provided a surprising amount of ambient heat. The paper diffused the candlelight beautifully while also diffusing the warmth. Now let's talk about clothing, because the Japanese approach to winter wear was just as important as heating methods. The key was layering. The fundamental garment was the kimono, but during winter, people wore multiple kimono layers. Close to the skin, you'd wear a thin cotton kimono called a juban. Over that, a warmer kimono made of silk or thicker cotton. And over that, for going outside or in especially cold weather, an even heavier outer kimono, possibly lined with padding. Around the house, people wore a garment called a tanzen, which was essentially a padded housecoat worn over regular kimono. It was lined with cotton wadding, making it warm but still allowing movement. For sleeping, there was the namaki, a sleeping kimono made of soft, warm fabric. The genius of the layering system was flexibility. You could add or remove layers as you moved between the warm area around the irori and the colder parts of the house. You could adjust for different activities. And the loose-fitting nature of kimono allowed air circulation while still trapping body heat. The traditional Japanese diet also played a role in winter survival. Hot foods weren't just comforting, they were strategic. Nabe, or hot pot dishes, were winter staples. A pot of broth would simmer on the irori, filled with vegetables, tofu, fish, or meat. Everyone ate directly from the communal pot, and the hot liquid warmed you from the inside out. The steam also added humidity to the dry winter air. Miso soup was consumed at nearly every meal, providing both hydration and warmth. Okayu, a rice porridge, was another winter favorite, easy to digest and warming. And then there was amazake, a sweet fermented rice drink served hot, which was believed to strengthen the body against winter illness. Green tea, especially hojicha and genmaicha, was consumed throughout the day. The ritual of preparing and drinking hot tea wasn't just cultural. It was a practical way to maintain body temperature and stay hydrated when cold weather can suppress thirst. Even the ingredients changed seasonally. Winter vegetables like daikon radish, kabocha squash, and negi onions were believed to have warming properties according to traditional medicine. Root vegetables stored well and provided sustained energy for enduring the cold. Now, we need to address something that might surprise you. Traditional Japanese homes were actually designed to be somewhat cold in winter. This wasn't a flaw. It was intentional, and understanding why requires looking at Japan's climate holistically. Japan experiences hot, humid summers. In many regions, summer heat and humidity are far more oppressive than winter cold. Before air conditioning, Surviving summer was actually the bigger challenge. Houses were designed primarily for summer comfort, with features like raised floors that allowed air circulation underneath, paper screens that could be fully opened to catch breezes, and deep eaves that provided shade while allowing winter sun to enter at a lower angle. The same features that made summers bearable made winters colder. But the Japanese adapted. They developed portable heating solutions that could be set up in winter and removed in summer. They created clothing and bedding systems that could be adjusted seasonally. They designed social practices that minimized exposure to the coldest parts of the house. This represents a fundamental philosophical difference. Western architecture often aimed to control the indoor environment year-round, fighting against nature. Japanese architecture aimed to live in harmony with seasonal changes, adapting human behavior to work with natural cycles rather than against them. There's also a cultural dimension worth exploring. In Japanese aesthetics and philosophy, there's a concept called gaman, which roughly translates to endurance or perseverance. The ability to withstand discomfort without complaint was seen as a virtue, a form of spiritual and character development. This didn't mean suffering needlessly. It meant accepting that some discomfort was natural and using it as an opportunity for mindfulness and appreciation. The cold made you grateful for warmth. The contrast between the chill of the outer rooms and the coziness of the Irori area made that warmth more precious. Winter's harshness made spring's arrival more joyful. This philosophy extended to practices like misogi, cold water purification rituals, which were believed to strengthen both body and spirit. Even today, some Japanese people practice cold bathing or wear minimal clothing in winter as a form of conditioning. Let's examine some regional variations, because Japan stretches from subarctic Hokkaido to subtropical Okinawa, and winter strategies varied accordingly. In the northern regions, particularly Hokkaido and northern Honshu, winters were severe. Houses there were built sturdier, with thicker walls and more substantial roofs to handle heavy snow. The Irori pits were often larger, and families spent more time gathered around them. Some houses had an entire room dedicated to the Irori, called an Irori no Ma. Snow itself became a building material of sorts. Heavy snow piling against the walls provided natural insulation, creating a buffer against wind and cold. Some farmhouses were designed with this in mind, with lower first-floor walls that would be buried in snow by midwinter. In central Japan, including Kyoto and the surrounding regions, winters were cold but less extreme. Here, the architectural focus was more balanced between summer and winter needs. The kotatsu became more popular than in the far north because the climate didn't require constant central heating. In southern Japan and Okinawa, winters were mild enough that minimal heating was needed. Houses there prioritized ventilation and shade even more heavily. When cold snaps occurred, people relied mainly on clothing layers and hot food rather than heating devices. There were also economic variations. Wealthy samurai and noble families had larger homes with multiple irori, servants to maintain fires, and abundant charcoal supplies. They had thicker, higher quality kimono and more layers of bedding. Some estates even had separate winter and summer residences. Common farmers and workers made do with simpler solutions. A single small irori might serve an entire family. Bedding was thinner, clothing was patched and reused, but the basic principles remained the same: focused heating, layered clothing, hot food, and adaptation. Point: the fuel source was primarily charcoal, made from hardwoods through a carefully controlled burning process. Charcoal production was a skilled trade. Good charcoal burned longer, produced more heat, and created less smoke than wood. It was also easier to store and transport. Making charcoal required cutting wood into specific sizes, stacking it in an earthen kiln called a kamado, and burning it in a low-oxygen environment. The process took days and required constant monitoring. The resulting charcoal was then sold or distributed throughout communities. Different types of wood produced different qualities of charcoal. Oak charcoal, called kunugi, was prized for its long burn time and high heat output. It was expensive and often reserved for the Irori. A cheaper charcoal might be made from pine or other softer woods and used for less critical purposes. Some households supplemented charcoal with other heat sources. In rural areas, people burned rice straw, dried grass, or other agricultural waste. These burned quickly and produced less heat than charcoal, but they were essentially free and served for quick warming or cooking tasks. The transition to modern heating began during the Meiji period in the late 19th century, when Japan rapidly modernized and adopted Western technologies. However, traditional heating methods persisted for decades, and some are still used today. Electric and gas kotatsu became popular in the 20th century, replacing charcoal with safer heating elements. Many Japanese homes still use kotatsu in winter, though now they're simply plugged into the wall. Point: the ritual of gathering under the warm blanket remains a cherished cultural practice. Central heating, rare in Japan until recently, has gradually become more common in newer buildings. However, many Japanese homes still don't have whole house heating. Instead, they use portable space heaters, air conditioning units with heating functions, or heated floors in specific rooms. The reasons are partly cultural and partly practical. The cost of heating an entire poorly insulated wooden house would be prohibitive. The preference for spot heating over ambient heating remains, and there's a lingering cultural comfort with temperature variations throughout the home. Modern Japanese homes have incorporated some traditional wisdom while adding new technologies. Heated toilet seats are nearly universal. Heated bathroom floors prevent the shock of stepping onto cold tile. Instant water heaters provide unlimited hot water for the beloved Japanese bath. The ofuro, or Japanese bath, deserves special mention as a winter survival tool. Unlike Western showers, the Japanese bath is for soaking, not washing. You clean yourself first, then sink into a deep tub of very hot water, often 40 to 42 degrees Celsius. The evening bath was and remains a daily winter ritual. After a cold day, soaking in the ofuro warms your entire body to the core. The heat relaxes muscles and improves circulation. Families often bathed sequentially using the same water, which was kept hot by a heating system underneath or beside the tub. In traditional homes, heating the bathwater required significant effort and fuel, making it a precious resource not to be wasted. The hot water might be used first for bathing, then for washing clothes, and finally for watering plants. There's profound wisdom in the traditional Japanese approach to winter that's relevant even today, especially as we face energy challenges and climate change. First, the principle of heating people rather than spaces saves enormous amounts of energy. Why heat an entire room to 20 degrees Celsius when you can keep a person warm with focused heat and appropriate clothing? Second, accepting some discomfort and temperature variation isn't just about building character, it's healthier. Constant exposure to controlled temperatures may weaken our natural thermoregulation abilities. Some temperature stress actually benefits the immune system and metabolism. Third, the social aspects of shared heating encouraged family bonding. A gathering around the irori or kotatsu wasn't just about staying warm. It created intentional time together, conversation, shared meals, and strengthened relationships. Fourth, the seasonal awareness fostered by living closer to natural temperature variations created a deeper connection to cycles of nature. You noticed the changing seasons more acutely. You anticipated and prepared for winter. You celebrated spring's arrival with genuine relief and joy. Modern attempts to completely control our environment year-round have distanced us from these natural rhythms. There's something to be said for the Japanese approach of adaptation and harmony, rather than domination and control. Scientists studying traditional Japanese heating methods have found them remarkably sophisticated. The irori's central placement creates optimal heat distribution. The kotatsu traps heat with extraordinary efficiency. The layering systems in clothing and bedding provide excellent insulation while allowing flexibility. Research into traditional Japanese homes has influenced modern sustainable architecture. Concepts like passive solar design, thermal mass, natural ventilation, and spot heating all appear in traditional Japanese buildings. Contemporary architects studying vernacular Japanese architecture have found principles applicable to modern energy-efficient design. The Japanese concept of mottainai, roughly meaning "what a waste," also applied to heat management. Every bit of warmth was valued and utilized. Coals from the irori might be moved to a portable brazier. Hot water from cooking was used for washing. Even the warmth from human bodies in close proximity was considered a resource. So to return to our original question, how did traditional Japanese homes survive freezing winters without fireplaces? The answer is they did have heating, just not the kind Western visitors expected. They had the ingenious irori, providing central heat, cooking capability, and social focus. They had the kotatsu, offering efficient spot warming. They had sophisticated clothing and bedding systems. They had architectural features that, while prioritizing summer comfort, still allowed for winter adaptation. They had cultural practices and dietary habits that supported cold weather resilience. Most importantly, they had a different philosophy. Instead of trying to maintain summer temperatures indoors during winter, they accepted seasonal variation and adapted to it. Instead of heating entire spaces uniformly, they heated people directly where they sat, worked, and slept. Instead of fighting nature, they worked with it. This wasn't primitive or inferior to Western methods. It was a sophisticated, culturally embedded system developed over centuries and refined through countless winters. It was sustainable, using renewable charcoal rather than fossil fuels. It was social, encouraging family cohesion, and it was effective, keeping millions of people alive and reasonably comfortable through harsh winters for over 1,000 years. Today, as we grapple with energy costs and climate change, there's much we can learn from traditional Japanese heating wisdom. Maybe we don't need to heat our entire homes to 22 degrees Celsius. Maybe spot heating and appropriate clothing make more sense. Maybe accepting some temperature variation isn't deprivation, but adaptation. Maybe the old ways weren't so old-fashioned after all. The next time you see a kotatsu in an anime, or read about an irori in a historical novel, remember, these weren't quaint cultural artifacts. They were brilliant solutions to the universal human challenge of staying warm in winter. Solutions that worked in harmony with nature rather than against it. And solutions that just might have something to teach us about living more sustainably in our own time. Traditional Japanese homes survived freezing winters not despite their design, but because of it. They survived through ingenuity, adaptation, and a profound understanding that the goal wasn't to conquer winter, but to live through it gracefully. Finding warmth not just in fire and charcoal, but in family, food, point, ritual, and acceptance of nature's rhythms. And in that acceptance, perhaps they found something we've lost in our climate-controlled modern world: a deeper appreciation for warmth when it comes, and a recognition that some of life's greatest comforts are born from contrast with discomfort. That's the real secret of how traditional Japanese homes survived winter. They didn't just survive it, they lived with it, adapted to it, and in doing so, created a culture of resilience, togetherness, and harmony with the natural world that endures even today.